Hey everybody, this is Jackie Luqman and Abdishahid Luqman with another episode of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media anywhere.
Believe that.
So what's going on, Mr. Luqman?
Well, what's going on is that we got a couple things that we wanted to cover today. And what's first on the agenda?
First on the agenda is obviously this Super Bowl, what is it, 54?
I can always keep up with the Super Bowl because the first Super Bowl was the year I was born. I'll be 54 this year.
Oh, well, that's an easier way for me to figure out what the Roman numerals that I forgot what they mean stand for. So it's just 1 year less than my hubby's age. So it is Super Bowl 54. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the way Sanders is being treated, not just only by the media, but by the other Democratic candidates, the stalwart.
The Dinos.
Yeah, the Dinos, the Democrats in name only, but really these people are exposing what the Democratic Party really, really is and what it's really about. And we need to be clear on what both of these issues mean in regard to real revolution in this country.
But before we go on, first of all, let's welcome Lisa Catlett.
Hey, Lisa. What's going on?
Our good friend Tony.
Hey, Tony. Good to see you.
Yeah, and others who we don't see the name of. All of those who are on YouTube.
Over on YouTube. Lisa, you're over there on YouTube too.
Yep. So those on YouTube and those who have joined us, we welcome you. And we also would like, if you haven't done it already, to share this video.
Yep.
Start a watch party if you can. Invite your friends, your enemies, misguided Republicans, and all others, and just any misguided Democrats. Whatever. This is we try to do political education to the best of our ability.
Yes.
And so and look, let them know this is the most dangerous show on social media. And if you haven't clicked on the notifications to know when we come on, because sometimes we don't always get a chance to do the ads.
Yeah.
So, but if you do click the notification, you don't need the ads. You know when we're coming on. And also, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube page, please do that.
Yep.
And, Jackie, just real quickly, 2020 is going to be a good year for Luqman Nation.
You think?
Well, it is because... we're going to expand. We're going to venture into other areas in order to, and I hate using this word, but in order to improve our brand. I can't stand that. So
I know.
capitalist.
It is so incredibly capitalist.
Oh my God! But we do have plans for Luqman Nation. But we like being in the bomb shelter. So we love it in the bomb shelter. So
we do.
Right, but just stay tuned, stay with us, and those of you who've been with us for a while, continue. We appreciate your support and continue to stay with us. The best is yet to come.
Speaking of support, if you have not looked into supporting Luqman Nation on Patreon to be a monthly patron, please consider doing that. If you like what you see, if you like what you hear here in Luqman Nation, consider supporting us with $3, $5, $7, or for a monthly contribution. That $3, $5, or $7 really does go a long way in defraying some of the costs of some of the things that we like to do here in Luqman Nation, like cover protests, getting to and from locations, covering events, and doing interviews, all this nice equipment, and the electric bill. Practical stuff that they don't really tell you about that comes with independent journalism. We don't have CNN money. And look, if you like what you hear, like what you see, please consider being a patron of Luqman Nation. You can find us on Patreon under LUQMANNATION. We appreciate your support very, very much.
And remember, the revolution may not be televised, but it has to be funded.
Oh, ooh, right. And speaking of funding the revolution, okay, let's get into this Super Bowl.
Let's.
All right. We're not watching the Super Bowl this year. We're not trying to say that we're better than anybody else, that we're more revolutionary than anybody else. We just kind of don't buy into the hype anymore. Like 2 years ago when the Eagles played the Patriots,
which is
we watched because we hate the Patriots that much. Who doesn't? Who doesn't live in New England? And it was good to see the Philadelphia Eagles, who arguably, other than like the Raiders, are like, here's a politically incorrect thing I'm about to say. The Philadelphia Eagles are probably like the most ghetto team in the NFL.
Well, no, continue that point because I want to ride on that.
I mean, so it was really, really good to see, these down home, round away, just good old homeboys beat the snot out of the New England Patriots.
Out of Tom Brady and the Master Race.
Oh, that. I mean, we will always enjoy watching the look of shock on the Master Race's poster boy,
right?
And Trump's acolyte on the field in the what's the owner's name? No, the coach's name, Bill Belichick. Belichick, Mr. Trumper, and who is it? Kraft.
Well, the owner's the one.
Owner's Kraft.
Well, he got in some trouble for prostitution or something, didn't he?
Well, the Master Race needs hookers too.
Right. I mean
they need a little comfort too. But I mean, outside of that, we really haven't paid any attention to football. Nah. Not saying that we're better than anybody else for not watching the Super Bowl. We just realized that once certain industries got their claws into major sports, then it stopped becoming like entertainment and it started becoming a vehicle for certain ideologies.
Well, I'm glad you said that because Tony Harrell said, and I would agree with him, agree with you, Tony, that the Eagles, he said that the Eagles are more blue collar than ghetto. That,
that's a great point.
People have been asking me today about, am I going to watch the Super Bowl? And of course, everybody assumed, and part of it is the whole Kaepernick thing and the way that the NFL handled not only that, but also the way the NFL handled Ray Rice and handled other black, But I had, Mike Vick, but they took away football from me, and I'm gonna tell you who took football away from me: corporatism. Took football away. When I was a kid coming up, and I'm glad, Tony, that you brought up the blue collar stuff because that's what football was to me. Football was like when I was a kid. I'm seriously. Football was like our dads getting off of work and on weekends, guys that had other jobs and and this is what they did to earn side money. I mean, man, I wasn't even a Washington skin fan because we try not to use the
we do not say that name,
right? But I was I wasn't even a Washington football fan, but I loved the Hogs. I mean, man, the Hogs was like. They were like the epitome to me of blue collar guys, big guys that had the belly hanging underneath the jersey,
sat around drinking beer off the clock, and
now these guys. I mean, and look, I understand things change and everything like that, but I mean the Oakland Raiders, man. I mean, who didn't love the Oakland Raiders? These guys look like they just got out on parole. And they just formed a team, and they were breaking people's spines, and and guys had dirt on their uniform. You don't see dirt on guys' uniforms anymore.
Well, because none of the fields are actually dirt.
That's what I'm talking
concrete. About. It's concrete laid over with this pretty astroturf. Ooh, there's a metaphor. How about that? For a let me tell you what the NFL is now. I agree with you, and Abdus is right. Thank you, Tony, for bringing up that point that The Eagles aren't so much ghetto as that they're working class.
Exactly.
And so were the Hogs of the Washington football team. They were working class guys who did the dirty work, didn't mind doing the dirty job, getting their uniforms dirty, getting down in the mud. And wallowing around and just getting the work done. That's supposed to be, the backbone of America, right? Well, how about now, the NFL, in the ideology it pushes, it's very much like the astroturf that all the fields are made of.
Fake.
It's fake. The surface underneath the astroturf isn't the cushiony ground, but it's the unforgiving concrete that'll break you in half when you fall on it. Let me tell you what's going on with the NFL now. The NFL is a corporate entity. Not to say that it wasn't always like a business.
But it wasn't so much in your face.
Sure it was. But exactly, it wasn't so much in your face. People don't understand that this whole... and we had this conversation before, but it's worth repeating. People don't understand that this whole outrage about Colin Kaepernick and the way he chose to protest police brutality against unarmed black and brown and poor people in this country was transmogrified into this thing against a protest against the flag or the anthem. But see, when I grew up, and people who have been longtime football fans have been lying this whole time since Kaepernick's protest, because y'all all know that most teams weren't even on the field during the singing of the national anthem in the first place until 2009. Everybody was in the locker room. Everybody.
Yep.
Everybody. Football teams, the coaches, the sideline staff. The only people who were out on the field during the singing of the national anthem was whoever it was who was singing the national anthem. And half the time, there wasn't actually a person singing the national anthem. It was played over the PA. And then most of the fans in the stadiums didn't even stand and put their hands over their heart.
No, they were trying to get the concession guy to get the beer.
They were trying to get to the concession stand and go into the bathroom before the game started. So all these white folks outraged at that uppity Negro,
and some blacks too,
thinking that they are a part of this system, outraged at that uppity Negro for how dare he protest our beautiful flag and anthem. Okay, well the whole league didn't give a crap about that beautiful flag or the beautiful anthem until 2009. Now there are some conflicting details about whether teams started coming out onto the field after the Department of Defense started investing money in ads being played for jet fighters and tanks and saluting the troops that started around 2009. We all know correlation doesn't really equal causation, but sure is a coincidence. So, this whole thing about the anti-Americanness of Kaepernick's protest is garbage. It's ahistorical.
Well,
it's
and you'll forgive me for interrupting.
No, please.
But at the same time, we already knew that it wasn't so much about Kaepernick's the un-American tag being attached to Kaepernick's protest, because all black protests, according to the mainstream, is un-American. So it wasn't just Kaepernick who was singled out as being un-American. All Black Lives Matter was considered un-American. I mean, any black descent or African descent in this country is always considered to be un-American, because we ain't supposed to complain about nothing, So, we're supposed to just, take what is dished out to us and keep on going. The NFL, it was not a much bigger football fan than me when I was coming up. I mean, I was always a lifelong Eagles fan, but I was a big football fan. And then all of a sudden the prima donnas came. Now these guys look like, and look, I'm not hating, but these guys look like, like they just got chiseled out of granite. And I like my football players with a little mayonnaise on them.
I did
because
too.
I was a big, I wasn't so much into like the wide receivers and stuff. I like the big guys. I mean, I was always a big guy, and I played positions like that. And I was always like, man, look at this guy, and so. Sort of like how John Madden used to,
Exactly.
John Madden liked the big guys.
Exactly. The Franco Harrises, right. The whole Hogs offensive line, just everything about it. And
speaking of working class, and we'll move on. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I wasn't a Washington football fan, but you can't get more blue collar than John Riggins.
Come on,
Earl Campbell.
Earl Campbell.
Oh, yes. I mean, come on. You can't get. I mean, when I saw John Riggins just run folks over, and I mean, he wasn't a pretty runner. He was just a steamroller. Earl Campbell, I mean, was a little bit more. Had a little bit more moves than John Riggins, but he was just a locomotive, and I mean, and so
Lawrence Taylor.
You go to Chicago, Dick Butkus. I mean, Dick Butkus looked like he came from the meat factory in Chicago, and they just say, "Hey, you want to coach the football team on Sunday?"
All right.
Yeah, why not?
I mean, that's when football for us was fun. There were always corporate sponsors selling beer and stuff like that and hot dogs. But then the military-industrial complex realized that, number one, we were in an endless war. The Pentagon decided that they wanted to invade and overthrow the governments of how many countries was it? 7 countries?
Right.
7 countries in 5 years. And they knew that was going to be an engagement that was going to be longer than 5 years. They've always known that they were going to be at war for 20, possibly the next 40, 50 years. How do you convince a people that has been traditionally, maybe not necessarily anti-war, but definitely anti-interventionist? The people in this country, I need to stop saying we, white people in this country have historically...
And their Negro allies.
And their Negro allies have historically looked at conflicts around the world and said, that ain't our problem. Unless, of course, it was some resources that this government said it wanted that these people needed to have. But people don't realize that after World War I, black people started to question whether we should be involved in the wars in this country too. And then especially after Vietnam, a lot of black folks were like, nah, son, we ain't doing this no more. So how do you convince a nation of people who, for different reasons, really soured on U.S. involvement, military involvement in other countries?
Right.
Well, you commercialize war. You make it appealing. You make it sexy. You sell war like you sell cars.
Right. I mean, you convince every young man and woman out there who's, that you can be Rambo.
Right.
The army of one.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, try sending a single soldier up against, But you're right, Jackie. And the thing of it is that the military, because we don't have the draft anymore, or because they don't have the draft anymore. So how else to get to recruit?
Right.
I mean, a lot of municipalities have banned the military from coming into their schools now. Right. So now the military is like, well, I know what, everybody watches football.
Yeah, and everybody brings their kids to football games.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody, the whole families watch football, especially the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is the one event that has the highest viewership all year long in the United States. One event. So how does the military not turn this into a marketing opportunity? So that's why we, first started to be like, we ain't doing so much NFL anymore. And then the Kaepernick thing happened. And then let me tell you why, as much as we respect Kaepernick for standing up to the system of the NFL, which is the NFL is an extremely conservative, and I do mean politically conservative, culture.
Yeah, I mean, you don't expect a bunch of billionaire white guys to be liberal.
Precisely. It's an extremely conservative culture, especially now with the involvement of the military-industrial complex in marketing with the NFL. It's very reactionary, meaning its response to every issue is a very conservative response. Excuse me. So when Kaepernick did what he did, which was a very brave thing to do.
Of course.
I'm never going to take that from him. Here's a young man who stood up to the system of the NFL and all of that criticism. And with the exception of a few people who were by his side, was basically, on the field.
Right.
He was basically by himself, ostracized by other football players, by other coaches, definitely by management, ostracized by sportscasters, Monday morning quarterbacks, political pundits, ostracized by politicians, and the American public. And still this guy continues on. I'm never going to take away the credit that he deserves for doing that.
I mean, he was actually a throwback, if I may say. He was actually a reminder of the political activist athletes that we had back in the 60s, like Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, how they all got together, outside of Ali, when Ali was put in jail for refusing the draft. It was Jim Brown and all of them that came together, to defend Muhammad Ali. It wasn't no thing about, well, I just play basketball. I don't have nothing to do that. So the political activism in sports is not nothing new. I mean, remember the Olympics,
Right.
So I mean,
with John Carlos and Tommy Smith.
So Kaepernick was like a reminder of like days long going by, when people risked their careers, when they risked. Muhammad Ali gave up millions of dollars to take a stand against the Vietnam War, and so now what we're talking about now is the fact that Kaepernick did what basically all of us should be doing. We're not going to get any change in this country until we understand that change is not going to come by osmosis. Right. It's not going to come from praying. It's not going. We have to sacrifice, and I know that sound is easier said than done. I understand that, but if we want, I mean, look, Martin Luther King could have just remained a preacher in Birmingham.
Right.
Kaepernick, he was in the prime of his career. He could have just rode the wave of his career in the NFL. People, you have to sacrifice.
Yeah.
We have to sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely a sacrifice for that brother. But here is the thing that we need to keep in mind when we're trying to change this system within the confines of capitalism.
Right.
Right. Kaepernick had a contract with Nike, and I thought it was a really cool thumb in the eye on Nike's part that they gave a contract. They signed a contract with Colin Kaepernick, and at the same time, they continued their contract with the NFL.
Right.
So Nike was like, well, screw the NFL. We're going to pay Colin Kaepernick with NFL money, basically. And I understand that was not Nike being revolutionary at all, but that was Nike being a capitalist saying, we're going to make our money regardless. And that was like, for me, now people might disagree, for me, that was an example of how, if you're going to be a capitalist in this capitalist system, then okay, this is how you use the system. But you have to be careful with that. Because, see, capitalists are going to be capitalists, and they're only going to cape for you but so far. Because, see, Nike ain't going to give up that NFL contract for Colin Kaepernick. Here's why. Nike is going to have an ad in the Super Bowl, but they're not, that ad, as far as we know, as far as reports have been showing so far, that ad will not feature Colin Kaepernick. Now, Nike just made a whole boatload of money off of putting Kaepernick's image on the back of one of their shoes.
Right.
Shoes sold out in like a day. So
it shows you the support that he has.
It shows you the support he has. It shows you that that them signing a contract with Kaepernick, which I think they had for a while, but them making him the face of their campaign and sticking with him was a shrewd business move. They knew the support Kaepernick had outside of these crazy, white supremacists who hate the man because of, some made up stuff in their mind that, he's protesting the anthem. But Nike didn't say to the NFL, no, you're not going to tell us who we're going to have on our ad campaign at the Super Bowl. Kaepernick is one of our he's one of our clients. He's one of our, whatever we have a contract with him. We use him in our ads wherever we feel like. That's not what Nike said. No, how that conversation went was the NFL said, okay, fine, we'll take your money for this ad, but you better not have Kaepernick in it. And that's what Nike did.
And then if you want to know, Nike's always been a chump when it comes to America, because I remember maybe about 20 years ago, maybe longer than that, when Oprah Winfrey, when she had her show, and she approached the owner of Nike, the CEO of Nike, and all this patriotism that Nike was passing around at the time. He went to I believe it was either Seattle or Portland, but it was somewhere on the West Coast, and people were there saying, "Hey, build a factory here. You're so pro-American, build a factory." This guy, when he was confronted on camera, this guy, first he said that Americans didn't want to make shoes. That's what he said. And then when Americans showed up and said, "Yeah, we'll make shoes," well, so let's be real. They're not about revolution. No. They're about the bottom line. No. And then, like you said, Jackie, you were right that the marketing people said, "Hey, you know what? Kaepernick got some supporters out there." And these old racist CEOs and stuff, they ain't gonna be around much longer. So right. So why invest everything in them? The culture is changing. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So they what's true. They knew the culture was changing. They know that the whole Nike brand is basically a youth thing. Right. And right. So it's like, okay, well, we can't. That's our bread and butter too. Right.
Exactly. So like Uncle Brother over on YouTube said, all of that was Nike being opportunist. You have to remember, you must remember that in this capitalist system, capitalists are always going to be opportunists. Right. If they can make money off of your so-called movement, they will. And they're never, ever going to help you foment an actual revolution in this country, because a revolution would mean that the vehicle through which they make their money, capitalism, gets upended. And they're never going to let that happen. This is not a slight against Colin Kaepernick at all. I just want us to be clear. We just want folks to be clear, Abdul Shahid, that in a capitalist system, you are not going to be able to foment a true revolution with a capitalist or a capitalist entity as a partner. They're not going to fund your revolution.
And we really need to be honest, because, again, this is, we're not about revisionist history here. I mean, in a capitalist society, you have actually no choice but to deal with capitalists. I mean, Martin Luther King, the Southern Christian Leadership, and all of the civil rights groups, including the Panthers, all of them receive money from capitalists. In one sense or another. If you receive money from working people in this country who get their money from capitalism, so it's really not something that you can really avoid in a country like this. But at the same time, again, Kaepernick, Dr. King, and others who had to, hey, you got to play Congress for the devil sometimes. But what happens is that you can play Congress for the devil, but still write your own songs.
That's the thing. In this case, in the case of King and the SCLC and SNCC and even the Panthers, receiving money from individual people, and that's a great point that you brought up, because a lot of people don't know that the civil rights movement, when people got arrested, who do you think paid their bail? Exactly. It wasn't. It was working people some people who had businesses, individual people who had businesses, some people who worked straight jobs. Somebody had to keep a job to pay people's bail. Exactly. Exactly. Somebody had to keep a job to pay people's rent who were out there on the streets. These are kind of practical things, but it's a different kind of thing when you're talking about having a corporate partner in the revolution. That's not gonna, Nike ain't gonna fund no revolution. And I think that the way that, like I said, we'll see the ads at some point, but I'd be surprised if Kaepernick face shows up on the big screen at Miami Stadium in the Nike ad.
Well, that's fine. I mean, he's his future is he's heading towards sainthood anyway.
So. And that's cool. He needs to keep doing his thing. Because as a footnote to this issue, the fact that SuperBowl 53 is in Miami and that Kaepernick is probably not even going to be mentioned in Nike's ad whatsoever is ironic, because Kaepernick had a massive Know Your Rights camp in Miami, in the Overton neighborhood, which is poor black neighborhood in Miami.
Very poor.
So those kids, those black kids and those Latino kids in Miami know what Kaepernick stands for. And they are beginning to see what the NFL really stands for. So in that regard, in exposing the lies and the true face and the true nature of these corporate capitalist entities, that's why these kinds of slights are necessary to the revolution. Because sometimes this is the only way you can show people just what this demon of a system is. You just got to let it be a demon.
And I mean, if those of you who are choosing to watch the game, fine. I mean, we're not, even when we started to support Kaepernick by boycotting the NFL, which was easy for us to do because we have given it up for a while. But we're not in the business of telling people what to do.
Right.
So I mean, if that's I have friends who said, "Oh, I'm not going to stop watching the NFL." Okay, fine. We can still remain friends. But at the same time, there's going to have to come a time when we're going to have to be uncomfortable. And again, sacrifice, even if it means not supporting your favorite team as far as Washington goes, with these racist names, which they and everything else. So we have to compromise. That's the only way that we're going to get any kind of revolution off the ground.
Yeah, and speaking of being uncomfortable and the system being exposed for what it is, and not being able to foment a revolution within this capitalist system. I remember 2016.
I do.
When we were trying to tell people who were talking about, oh, I want to join Bernie Sanders' revolution, that what Bernie Sanders was doing was not an actual revolution. Remember?
Yeah, yep.
Remember the blues people gave
me?
You
caught heat. We
caught heat online when I would say it on the other thing that we were doing. Oh, people just gave me the blues. People would come after us and, things need to change. Well, you're absolutely right. Things need to change, but change doesn't mean revolution. That's not the same thing. Reform is not the same thing as revolution.
Right.
Not saying that reform doesn't need to happen, but I think we're way beyond the need for just mere change.
Yeah.
But I think the only way that a lot of people were able to see how corrupt the Democratic Party is, we say all the time, hon, that we don't talk about the Republicans too much because they're obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, they show their hand pretty much all the time. Their slip is always showing. Not that their slip is always showing. Their bare naked ass is showing, and they don't care. They don't care. So why do we need to talk about them? We don't. We talk about the party that is supposed to be better than the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. These people run around telling us, ooh, vote blue no matter who, because we have to defeat this one president who's the worst president we've ever seen. And most poor black people and poor Latino people or Latinx people and most, a lot of poor white people are like, and then definitely Native Americans are like, you do realize we've been screwed since before he came along, right? But for a lot of people who did not fit into those categories, the 2016 Democratic Convention had to happen the way it did. For a lot of people to be angry enough to say, I'm leaving the Democratic Party. Not to say that they're leaving the Democratic Party for the Republican Party, but for people to see that the two-party system in this country is garbage. It's craptastic. It's a lie. Both parties are separate wings of the same evil bird, in the words of W.E.B. Du Bois. A lot of people had to experience the anguish of the Democratic Party sabotaging Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016 to get to that point. That is happening again. Because, did you hear Just today, several outlets reported that John Kerry. When was the last time you heard of that dude?
Oh, you talking about the French-looking John Kerry? Yeah.
the, the dehydrated French-looking. He does look like a dehydrated grape. Yeah. I'm so sorry. That's so wrong. But he actually came out of the woodwork and said that he is considering, and I think this is actually some leaked conversation.
Well, they meant to leak it.
Yeah, it was like, look at how crazy these people are, kind of leaked. Who he said that he is considering running to keep Bernie Sanders from destroying the Democratic Party. Think about what that means, folks. Bernie Sanders, for all of his limitations, right? Because he is running to be president of the United States within one of the two major parties.
Right, right.
What Bernie Sanders is doing is trying to move the Democratic Party back a little bit toward the left of FDR. He's not really trying to foment an actual revolution in this country. That's not what he's doing. Not to say that what he's doing is bad. We're not saying that. But we're trying to make clear to people that there is a difference between reform and revolution. Revolution is a nice catchphrase. It's a nice catchy word to get people all, fired up. But for us actual revolutionaries, we real sensitive with our shit like that.
And then we have to understand too that there's steps to revolution. I mean, you just don't wake up one day and grab your axe and your shotgun and and start talking about you want to take over the state house and all this stuff. I mean, there are levels to this. So what Bernie is doing, I've always viewed it, Bernie, because Bernie has already changed the conversation politically in this country. Now you have other politicians, the Elizabeth Warrens and all the other ones, who are trying to out Bernie. You know what I mean? So now it's like, oh, I'm for free healthcare too, or I'm for this and I'm for that, and so now that's all because of Bernie. So Bernie kept it out there, and so you just don't wake up one day and decide that you just want to just have a coup. What it is that there are levels to this. So reform to me is not actually a bad word. I mean, reform usually starts off sometimes. When I say a bad word, like you said, when Bernie's operating within the system, well, that's laying the first brick.
Okay.
And then so what happens is that then it goes on and on, but there has to be foundation laying. You know what I mean? Now let me tell you something. This is not France. This is not Spain. This is the United States with the most militarized police and army in the world. We're the most surveilled citizens probably in the world. I think that we're probably even more surveilled than Chinese citizens. And the fact that we are, we talk about Africans in this country being fodder for the capitalist system. The IRS is the most efficient tax collecting agency in the world. And so part of the United States having all this bank, as we call it in the streets, is the fact that they mortgage us.
Oh my God!
So they mortgage us, and so the other countries, it's like oh well, they got 300-something million people, all with social security numbers, and they're all mortgaged. They're solvent. They're good. So so we don't realize how much of a whore they done made us into. So so that is the thing. So when we talk about revolution in this country, we have to understand that this is a different animal here with the United States. This is not Panama. This is not, Mozambique. This isn't the Sudan. No, this is actually the American government, like I said, with the most militarized police force. Even in D.C., we got like a dozen police agencies. And I mean, and all of them are looking to get you. So, and then you're talking about a country with the most sophisticated surveillance. And with all of that, you're talking about the most ruthless government. Who has no problem disappearing you. You think, when you think you're not on their radar, you are. And the fact that when you make too much trouble, because one thing that I was told years ago by a wonderful mentor of mine, Imam Rashid Abdullah, and he used to always say, he said, you could do anything in America, but change the system, He said, you go to the graveyards, and the graveyards are full of people who tried to change the system. That don't mean we don't try, but we have to understand when you go into the boxing ring, you don't underestimate your opponent.
Oh my gosh, that
you have to understand who you're going up against.
Exactly.
You know, so we take this very seriously. You know, and I'll end on this point, is that when we talk about black people in this country, we was at the you and I went to the Cuban All-Star concert, and you know, backstage, we go backstage.
Afro-Cuban All-Stars.
Yeah, Afro-Cuban All-Stars, and we had a wonderful time. I mean, and so we were talking with some of our friends and acquaintances, and you know, the whole history of African American resistance to slavery came up. And one of the things that I have always stood my ground on when it came to talking to Africans in the diaspora who mistakenly think that we Africans in America just took this shit and that we never resisted, never this. I used to always say, and even before I even had some of the information I have now, I used to always say, I said, you know, Africans in this country was dealing with a different white man. And you know, people were like, well, what do you mean? Look, I mean, check his history. I say we would, and when I say white man, I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about the establishment, those who are in charge, the agrarian, the planter class,
right, the planter class, the landowning.
Those who were in charge. I'm not talking about the old poor white cabin guy that was on the banks of the Delaware River or something like that, trying to eke out a living. I'm talking about those who were in power. So when I use that phrase, that's what I mean. And what I'm saying is, this was the most brutal white man that I think any African had faced outside of leaving Africa, and yet, you know, we're the descendants of we're the descendants of those who felt most of the heat. So the fact remains is that that kind of experience had molded us in a way that it hasn't molded other Africans throughout the diaspora. You know, and so I say that to say that that we need to be understanding that through all revolutions and stuff is that things are take time, and this, but oh no, we're not. You know, we're not out of this fight.
No. I mean, just the difference between African Americans and Africans in the diaspora who eventually fought against their colonizers and won, kicked most of the colonizers at least from directly controlling the government, because trust and believe, they're still controlling black people's stuff all over the world, is that those people recognize that they were colonized. In this country, we don't believe we're colonized. That's a part of how insidious this white man has been in this country. But the reason revolution is so deeply ingrained in the blood and the bones of even black people in this country is because we've always revolted. Always. That there has always been a resistance to our subjugation in this country. We've just got to really be clear on what that means. Now, electoral politics is necessary because it's the system we have now, and if you're going to participate in it, you might as well get your politics right. You understand? Understand what you are voting for. We're not sitting here telling anybody that they shouldn't vote for Bernie Sanders or that they should. That's not our job.
I mean, we haven't even endorsed anybody.
We're not going to endorse anybody. That's not our job. We want you to be clear on what you are voting for. If you vote for Bernie Sanders, what you are voting for is a guy who wants to ease the economic burden off of poor and working class folk in this country.
Yes.
That's pretty much it. He wants to make a lot of rich people pay a little bit more money so that there can be a greater distribution of resources more equitably. That is not going to eliminate income inequality. It's just going to lessen it. He wants to do what you say all the time. He wants to take some of the pressure off. He wants to release some of the steam to keep the revolution, the actual revolution, from happening. And we're not saying that's a bad thing. We just want you to be clear on that's what he is talking about doing. A lot of his ideas are great. But what Bernie Sanders is not is an actual socialist. He's certainly not a communist. That socialist would be us. Because we're just like, listen, everybody should have the basics of a right to housing, a right to health care, free education. I
mean, the necessities of life.
Exactly. So that's what Bernie Sanders is advocating for. Sanders hinted at it. He's nibbled around the edges a little bit, but he ain't talking about really slashing the budget, the budget for the Department of Defense. And we're just telling you what the limitations are for changing within the system. Not saying we're just, making it clear. So Sanders is advocating for a little bit more of the pie for regular folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Democratic Party, their response is, no, fuck that.
But see, and I think that's the question that we should be asking ourselves, is why is that such a threat to the Democrats?
Precisely.
They're the ones who claim that they're for the working class, which we know that they abandoned the working class a long time ago. They're the ones who claim that they're for racial equality. Right. They're the ones who claim that they're against American imperialism, that they're against American militarism. So why, when a guy comes around and referencing Bernie Sanders, why would when this guy comes around, and he's not new to him, he's been around for 40 years and saying the same thing, but now people are listening.
Exactly.
That's the threat.
That's the threat, because people want the Democratic Party to change. That's what it is. People want the Democratic Party to actually pay attention to what they want, as opposed to the Democratic Party doing exactly the same thing that the Republican Party does, which is to pay attention to the lobbying interests of the insurance companies, the lobbying interests of the pharmaceutical companies, the lobbying interests of the defense. Democratic Party is just as much in bed. They are in the same bed with the Republicans, with all of those corporate lobbying massive interests. They're right on the pillow next to the Republicans. They sitting there having pillow talk with each other like we do before we go to sleep. Having pillow talk with each other, talking about how they gonna screw the rest of Americans over. The Republicans talk about how they gonna lie to their constituents about what they're gonna do for them, how they're gonna tell their mostly white and mostly older constituents that they're gonna keep the blacks and the Hispanics. I know that's not the correct term, but that's what they call the brown people and the immigrants from taking their stuff, so they can have a better chance at making it in America, knowing doggone well they are stealing from those people. They cutting their Social Security, they're cutting their disability benefits.
But again, I gotta say, we're seeing this globally. I mean, we're seeing this in Greece. We're seeing it in Europe.
Yep.
We're seeing and it's an old play from a worn out playbook. It's an old tactic, I should say, from a worn out playbook. All the fascists done it. Hitler done it. I mean, all of them have done it. And so it's like, hey, look, this is what nationalism is. You can't build ethnic nationalism unless somebody got to be it. So you can't have, this American so-called melting pot and have people promote that if you're for white nationalism, if you're for white American nationalism. You can't if you're a Greek nationalist, and I'm talking about a Caucasian Greek nationalist. We seen a story today on Al Jazeera where people are pining for Mussolini. Yeah. So I mean, so what it is the fact that these nationalist movements and stuff, it's all built upon the fear of the other. Trump rode that wave all the way to the White House.
Yes, he
based
did.
on that.
Yes, he did. Because what was his overarching campaign slogan? Build that wall.
Right, exactly.
He wasn't talking about, he mentioned jobs. Sure he did, but mostly what did he talking about? What was he talking about? Building the wall. So
that they're going to use the Mexicans to do anyway. Because trust me, they don't. I mean, that's the ones that basically, and I'm saying that for real. I mean, it's I mean, you're going to use immigrant labor for it anyway. But
so for people to keep saying that people who voted for Trump weren't racist, come on now. But as despicable as the Republicans are with the way they dupe their you can't fool people with xenophobia and racism unless you harbor those sentiments anyway. You can't get that over on folks. You can't convince folks to hate other people just because you said so. Come on now. Look, people need to take responsibility for the politicians they keep voting for. Because isn't that what they tell us all the time?
All the time.
Every time one of their favorite Democratic politicians don't win something, what do? They always look at black folks and say, well, you didn't support so-and-so. Well, let me tell you why a lot of us have stopped supporting these Democratic establishment candidates who are the new face of Obama, who also said that he wanted to stop Sanders from taking over the Democratic Party. The Bloombergs, who is throwing all of his money into this race to stop Bernie Sanders, to stop a possible Bernie Sanders nomination. People like Amy Klobuchar, who was just as much of an avaricious anti-black prosecutor as Kamala Harris. Both of them need to go, but they want to stop Bernie Sanders. What they'll talk about, well, yeah, Medicare for all is a good idea, but we're not going to do Medicare for all because that's socialism. You know why they want to stop him? Because they don't want to give up their paychecks.
Well,
like we said.
Yep, that's it.
They're sitting they are laying in the same bed with the Republicans on the pillow. On the left, the Republicans are on the pillow on the right.
Yeah, they got the scotch, and the Democrats is smoking a cigarette.
The Democrats sitting there with a cigarette and a glass of wine, talking about they more cultured than their knuckle dragging, whiskey drinking partner that they claim they hate in public, but they sure do love that footsie.
Yeah, I mean,
at night.
Yeah, McConnell's like, will I see you tomorrow night, Nancy?
Nancy's like, yeah,
Nancy's
I'll
like,
be there.
I don't know. Depends. I'll call you.
Yeah. We'll see.
Hey, but when we're out in public,
we have to act like we hate each other.
Right.
The Democrats are sitting there on that left pillow talking about how they are going to make Democratic voters a bunch of promises, say some things that sound like they're going to do some things for working and poor people, but they're actually not going to change anything. And every once in a while, one of these people slips up and actually says what they mean. Because who was it who said to the Wall Street folks, if you elect me, nothing is going to change?
It was alleged that Biden said that. And Biden, you have to, sometimes, the gods throw you a bone.
Sometimes.
I mean, yep. and what I'm saying is, that was, Biden didn't say anything that most of us didn't expect. We were not shocked. But, but we have to appreciate some of Biden's disabilities, I should say. Because it's like, Biden's the type of guy that, unlike Hillary Clinton, who was a shrewd fox, Hillary would come around and said, now, she said the same thing, I believe, to them Wall Street people. But see, Hillary's shrewd enough that when she came in front of us, I went in there and I told them, you cut it out. That's enough. You cut that out. And then she walked away with her millions.
Right.
But see, Biden, he's not so shrewd. So Biden, he would say that and then go on camera in front of us and say, oh, nothing's going to change.
Yep. And then he'll get all pugilistic and all angry old man like he does when you challenge him on that. Well, look, we need the banks. We need the banks because I was there when the banks were created. Yep. And I know the good things.
In fact, I was the one who helped found the Freedmen Bank, along with some segregationists who were pro-Negro. And
I know they had stole those people's money. I know they did, and I told them not to do it. But we need the. but the money that they stole from the Negroes went to a good cause. That's how we built the railroads. So sometimes you have to compromise. Listen here, these Democrats are showing you precisely who they are. When Buttigieg sits there and says he believes everyone should have access to quality health care, but he doesn't want to force people to have Medicare if they like their doctor. Nobody who actually has to pay the amount of money they do actually likes their health insurance.
And come on, the like your doctor is overrated. Look, we had a few doctors in our lifetime. I never invited my doctor to dinner.
I don't like him that much.
No, I never took. You know, we never took our doctor on vacation with us and stuff.
I ain't sent my doctor Christmas
that's what I'm saying. So this whole thing, if you like your doctor,
oh my God,
please, if I don't have to pay anything, guess what? I can find a new doctor.
You know what?
And trust me, he'll be fine.
He'll be wonderful. And especially if I know that if I don't like him, I can go find another doctor that I like, and I won't have to pay for him either.
Right.
So this whole argument based that Democrats now are using, talking about, Medicare for all, Medicare for those who want it. Who wants a medical bill? Nobody wants a medical bill. But these people are letting you know that they don't want the Democratic Party to change from focusing on the interests of the people who they actually exist to serve. And that is the corporate moneyed interest. We're going to end on this point. We were listening to a political talk show this morning. We couldn't identify. We were on the radio. We were on our way to church. We were listening to this show. We couldn't identify the lady who was speaking. We knew it was a black lady, but we couldn't remember who it was. Excuse me. And she was saying pretty much what we just said about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is advocating relief for economic relief for struggling Americans. And that is resonating with people. And the response of the so-called Democratic...
Oh, yeah, the established Democratic pundit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was a woman, and her response was, well, he never says how he's going to pay for it. That was a blatant lie. And then, he's just an angry, crotchety, angry old man who's never gonna win the White House. Listen, all presidents have been crotchety, angry old men as far as I'm concerned. I don't really care what their temperament is. But if we're talking about just within the realm of electoral politics, we ain't talking about revolution here now. That's a whole different animal. And most of y'all Americans, y'all ain't ready for that. Y'all ain't ready for that. But if the Democrats do what I think they're going to do, and I am very, very convinced, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm convinced that the Democrats are going to find another way to deny Sanders a legitimate nomination. I bet you're gonna be ready for a real revolution then.
I'm gonna tell you how I feel like you're on the track there. And we're not making a prediction, but I feel like you're on track there because now it's like it's neck and neck. It's Biden and Sanders.
Right.
For some reason, number one can hold two people.
You know what else is? What? You know what the other just ridiculous thing I saw, and this is why I hate polls, and this is why I kind of hate these corporate pundits, because they've been making a big deal the past couple of days about how Sanders supporters, such a large percentage of Sanders supporters say that they're not going to vote for whoever the Democratic nominee is if it's not Sanders, right? Well, how about in the same poll, the candidate with the largest percentage of supporters that said they would not support the Democratic nominee if it's not their candidate were Andrew Yang's supporters.
Wow.
Over almost 50% of Yang's supporters said that if he is not the candidate, they will not vote for they will not support the Democratic nominee. But are any of the pundits talking about that? Are they talking about Andrew Yang? No, they're talking about Sanders supporters. 25, 30% of Sanders supporters who said that they wouldn't support the Democratic nominee. Right. Listen, we don't do vote shaming here. You vote for whoever you want to. Again, we just want you to be really clear on what you are voting for when you pull that lever or press that button to punch the little hole or put the check mark on the electronic voting machine next to the name of the person you are voting for President of the United States, or in this case, for the primary, in the primary election for the Democratic nominee. We just want you to be clear on who or what you're voting for. Bernie Sanders is, again, facing an uphill battle for the nomination for the Democratic Party.
I mean, really, like if you want to put it, it's like fighting for the soul of the Democratic Party. I mean, they lost their soul a long time ago. But if this party is going to remain any type of if this party is going to be um, legitimate in that way. I mean, I think we saw that the last few voter turnouts have proven that the majority of folks have given up on the Democrats of being uh, um, any type of opposition to the Republicans. Republicans just straight up just went up in there, man, and just gangstered the whole government.
Yeah,
and and the Democrats, man. I mean, I heard Chuck Schumer today, and I'll just make this brief. And I don't know about you. I'm sick of Chuck Schumer acting like a prostitute that keeps on performing services and not getting paid.
I mean, good grief, man.
He's like, oh, they did it again. They didn't pay me. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, man, I'm tired. It's like that's why I have a hard time being fully behind this established this Democratic establishment, because it's like, can't you guys get a victory once? Now they did a good thing with this impeachment. But even though we know it's not going to be the ball out of the park,
yeah.
but they blew that.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that that's all you hear is Schumer, and I'm whining, like I said, like it's like the Republicans, like hey, and there has to be change in that, because I really believe that like I said, when you look at the last few voting patterns, you see that the Democrats people have lost faith in them.
Yeah, I
confidence
mean,
in them.
look, when the Democratic Party complains about Sanders' policies being socialist, and they're not, and then their one retort is, he never says how he's going to pay for it. But the same people voted to give this president that they claim they hate so much a defense budget that is bigger than every other defense budget ever. $738 billion. And not one of them said, how are we going to pay for it? None of these political talk show pundits on the corporate media channels, none of them challenged the Democrats' votes on the defense budget for 2020. Nobody brought up that $738 billion and asked of the Democratic candidates, how are we going to pay for that?
Because they're not supposed to. And that's the thing. It's not that they don't know about it. It's they're not supposed to. It's all about standing behind your brand no matter what. And nobody wants to remind Democratic supporters about that type of hypocrisy. So it's saying we just don't talk about it. It's like a family when you have something tragic happen. No, we just don't talk about it. So but no, it's not that they don't know about it. It's not that they. It's just that they're handed a sheet of paper. This is your talking points. This is what you do. Hey, look, they had that meeting before the show. It's all about stopping Sanders.
Right. Yep. So listen, I hope that we're wrong. I hope we're wrong and he gets the nomination, and some of these things that he wants to implement actually come to fruition, because without it, that revolution
and that's
is
not
coming.
an endorsement.
That's not an endorsement. No. Just saying, if we're talking about electoral politics and y'all want some reform, then Bernie Sanders really is the only candidate that is even talking remotely about reform. But reform is not revolution. That's a different thing. And if Sanders is denied the nomination for the Democratic Party in some shady way, then some of y'all gonna be talking about you want a real revolution, and then come back and talk to us. Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
So we're a little over time, so we might can't get to some things today. But I don't know. I'm just gonna I'm gonna do a Magic Johnson, and I'm just gonna take the ball and just throw it behind my back. So, Editor-in-Chief, what we got time for? We're a little over though.
Well, we are a little over, but we just want to bring this point up, that you said earlier that the Republicans have been playing identity politics with these white folks in this country who harbor these racist resentments, and identity politics has always been used against black people. When we always talk about politicians advocating for things that we need, they act as if that, you know, they never play the race card. Oh, they never play the victim card. But you brought up a good point.
Well, I mean, I thought that you know, this shameful display with this so-called Trump Mideast plan with Netanyahu and you know, it's like, you know, Netanyahu is Trump's Tony Blair. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, you know how George Bush and Tony Blair would, like, you know,
Yeah.
and Netanyahu seems to be filling that role for Trump. You know what I mean? And so, you know, that's what I saw. But this shameful display and arrogance and backslapping and all of this disgusting. I just ran out of words for it. How can you have a peace plan without two parties being there? Clinton had Yasser Arafat there when they was at Camp David. Carter had Begin and Sadat. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean that's a sham. It's a sham to come up with any kind of plan for two groups that have issues, and here you are supposed to be the peacemaker, but the only one that's standing by your side is the one that you done gave everything to.
Right.
You know, Netanyahu, and forgive me, I'm going to use some language that might be offensive, so bear with me. Netanyahu was creaming in his pants, man. I mean, I watched that press conference. I mean, he was like, "Oh my God!" You
know, Trump has been the best friend
that
we've ever had. You know, we've had good friends in the White House before, but Trump has been the best friend that Israel has ever had. And if you know what the government of Israel has done,
well, I mean, but Netanyahu wasn't lying.
Right.
I mean, and I won't say that Trump is a friend. I think that Trump is, and you have said this before. Trump is really fulfilling the role of the Christian Zionist.
Absolutely, and it doesn't matter to whoever is the Prime Minister of Israel, President of Israel. It doesn't matter who is in that role, as long as they get rid of the Palestinians. They don't care what the agenda of the United States government is, as long as the U.S. government gives them what they want, which is the military and financial backing, as well as the ideological approval to do whatever they want to the Palestinian people. But we're not going to get deep into that.
Well, I want to ask
today.
what I want to say is that this was a discussion you and I had a couple of days ago. And we all remember apartheid South Africa. Now,
Yes.
now this peace plan, and like you said, we're not going to go too much into it, but this peace plan is basically setting up a Bantustan for the Palestinians. It's shameful. It's disgusting. It's illegal under international law, all of it. And the fact remains, because the United Nations said that they're still going with the 1967 borders.
Right.
But this is the question you and I, the discussion you and I had. We wanted to know, why was it that the international community had placed so much pressure on South Africa to the point that the apartheid government there folded. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of it was internal, but a lot of it came from the Europeans. Mm-hmm. It came from, I mean, there was really when the ball got rolling, which happened like in the late 70s and 80s, mm-hmm. and people was like, this apartheid thing's not cool. So when the ball started rolling, I mean, you had entertainers. Uh-huh. I remember Steven Van Zandt with Sun City. I'm not going to play Sun City. Yep. And so you had this global movement that, in spite of the Reagan administration, that had this constructive engagement, uh-huh. basically, saying, well, we're still going to do business. But even they couldn't hold that up anymore, right, because the pressure was getting so much. Now, we spoke about, why is it that the Palestinians can't get the same international support? Right. And when I say support, lip service. But why hasn't it been the same type of pressure with Israel that was placed on the apartheid government of South Africa? Because I don't care how many Google articles you read from pro-Zionists about Israel's not an apartheid state. It is.
It's an apartheid state.
They showed this wall. I mean, man, even the South African black Africans didn't have a big imposing prison wall. But the thing of it is that the UN, they condemn Israel for a lot of things. But unlike South Africa, who was sanctioned by the UN and other countries, Israel remains yet to be sanctioned. And so what we're saying is, why is that? Why is it that the Palestinians, unlike the black South Africans, why is it that the Palestinians couldn't get the same international support? And we'll tell you why in our next part.
Yep. You're going to have to tune in next week to dig into that with us. But we are a little bit over time. We do thank you so much for joining us on this installment of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media, anywhere.
Yeah.
Whatever you're going to do tonight, we don't care what you do. Just be good to each other while you're doing it. And as always, peace if you are willing to fight for it.
And if you got a significant other, make love.
Is that what they were doing?
Oh, live mic.
Our doggy timer down there. He's like, all right, you guys, stop talking to other